Let's get the view first of a former director of strategy for the Conservatives. Chris Wilkins worked on the leaders' debates with Theresa May in 2017 and Rishi Sunak when he stood in for Boris Johnson in 2019. Chris, good to have you on the show tonight. Thank you for your time. Your thoughts on what we witnessed in the last hour or so? Evening.
Yeah, I thought actually over the whole 60 minutes, I thought Rishi Sunak came across pretty well and actually was clearly well prepared, had a strategy and executed that strategy well. And I think he won the debate overall. I thought Keir Starmer actually felt pretty underprepared and had a slightly strange strategy. When your opponent is accusing you of not having a plan, it's a good idea to be able to come back with some detail. But he, I think, had chosen almost not to engage in the debate. And that meant him seem quite evasive at times. So overall, I thought a good result for Rishi Sunak. But of course, most people won't sit through the entire 60 minutes and they will see the clips on social media and things like that afterwards, and that's how they'll consume it. And probably the key takeaway is Rishi Sunak's charge about the £2,000 tax hike under Labour, which Keir Starmer didn't rebut very successfully. And that would probably be the top line I suspect that people will go away with.
It's interesting what you're saying, Chris, about him sort of not engaging in the detail, not directly rebutting that a great deal. Do you think the strategy from Labour was rise above it, look like the Prime Minister in waiting, don't get sort of bogged down and start fighting in the trenches?
Yeah, I think it was. I think very much don't engage in a debate, exactly, rise above it, be prime ministerial. But also, I think it tends to happen when you're the front runner in a situation like this, you become almost a bit overcautious and overly defensive. And it makes you sort of not be your natural self in a sense. And I got the sense there was a lot of that going on from him. So actually, there were clear opportunities when he could have either rebutted something Rishi Sunak said or actually put across the Labour policy. But yet, for some reason, was very hesitant to do so. And it did seem that it was a strategy decided before the debate, and he wasn't quite quick enough to think on his feet to respond in the right way at that point.
Quite a few people texting in just in the last few minutes in particular saying Rishi Sunak came across as rude or hectoring or a bully, says Samira here. That matters, doesn't it, Chris? It's not just about what the leaders say, it's also about how they come across. And the risk for Rishi Sunak is that some people will interpret his sort of his front foot strategy as making him actually quite dislikable.
Definite risk. And he did the same thing during the leadership debates when he debated Liz Truss. And it didn't go down very well at that point. So it's a high stakes strategy. But I also think when you're in Rishi Sunak's position, he didn't really have many other options at this point. He had to cut through. Yep. He had to make himself heard. He had to get his points across. He had to put Keir Starmer on the back foot. I think he did manage to do all of those things. So on balance, I think the Conservative Party will judge that it went well from that point of view. But it is a risk, and it does put off some people, particularly, frankly, when the moderator of the debate is female and he seemed to be talking over a lot of the time. It's a high-risk strategy, but I think they will have judged that actually for all the other reasons it was one worth pursuing and that they will think it paid off.
That's that poll. We'll talk more about it in a few minutes, Chris, but the 51-49% in Rishi Sunak's favour, it's a narrow win for the Prime Minister. Given the polls, will Conservative campaign headquarters be disappointed with that?
I think they'll be really pleased with how tonight has gone. They will judge it as a win overall.
It's not big enough to shift the dial, is it, in terms of the polls?
It's not big enough to shift the dial. There's probably little that the Prime Minister could have done this evening to really make a major shift in the polls. But I think what they will take away from it is two things. Firstly, they will think that they will have lodged just seeds of doubt in the mind of some voters. Keir Starmer, frankly, didn't respond to some of those things very well. Rishi Sunak performed well. So it's the start of laying some seeds of doubt in the public mind. And they will also take away the clear thing that actually they landed the point about £2,000 tax hikes under Labour, and Keir Starmer didn't rebut that. And it was very strange he didn't, because it's frankly a nonsense figure, but nonetheless he didn't rebut it.
You accept it's a nonsense figure.
Oh yeah, of course.
What does that say about Rishi Sunak? I called it propaganda earlier. Rishi Sunak's coming out claiming that independent analysis is independent analysis when, as you said yourself, it's not. It's nonsense. That's not prime ministerial.
It's not independent analysis because it's conducted by civil servants in the Treasury who are directed by politicians and special advisors.
And Conservative advisors.
But Rishi Sunak is not the first person to pull that trick. I mean, every government does it. So it's a kind of standard practice. But it was easily rebuttable from Keir Starmer. and he didn't rebut it,
Yeah.
and it will cut through, I think, and that's one of the things that the Conservatives will be very happy about.
Chris, thank you very much for coming on. Chris Wilkins there, former Director of Strategy for the Tories in Downing Street, who worked on the leadership debates with Theresa May in 2017 and Rishi Sunak when he stood in for Boris Johnson in 2019.